Hello, everybody. This is Michelle Starr once again with Mysti-Stories. Stories about life on the mystic path. I will reiterate just a little bit. Um, I've had experiences, spiritual experiences that um, have come to be in stories through dreams, visions, meditation. This is my 50th year, my golden jubilee in the practice of yoga. So it's been highly beneficial. And I want to let you know that not all yoga instructors are on the mystic path. So it's just something you can be aware of or not when looking for a teacher. And I want to start off with just a note. I hadn't remembered this at the time I've done my other videos. And by the way, this is number 8, and I have one more. This one shouldn't be too long, and the last one I may even read to you as a story that was actually published in an online magazine called Harness. It's written by women to give them a voice. And so this story is when I was 5 years old. My sister and brother and I were standing at the entrance to the bathroom in our house when we were little. It was a small house, and my mother's bedroom, my mother and father's bedroom, was adjacent to the bathroom, and that's where we were. I don't think my mother was at home at the moment, um, but she had been um, ritually spanking my brother and me, my twin brother and me, and my sister and us twins were just talking about it a little bit. And my sister mentioned that she thought my mother was sick. And at 5 years old, for whatever reason, that triggered an intuitive flash. And I knew at that moment, I felt the pressure on my brain. Uh, at that moment, I knew that I was going to live to be older than 100, and that the first part of my life would be really hard, and the last half would be very pleasant. Or at least a lot more manageable. So these things do happen. That reminds me of another little story that I don't think I told this one either. Um, so just by way of explanation, we do have parallel dimensions where we're operating within our incarnation. We are experiencing life in other parallel dimensions. And I say parallel because when I learned about this, I thought, well, that's interesting. I'd like to have that experience. And boom, spirit provides. So um, I was working in a law office, and I was using the back stairwell to get from one floor to another instead of using the elevator because it was just closer to my desk. And I was going down the stairs, and I felt this energy. It was me, but it was me. I think I was around 13 or 14 in this experience. Um, in this experience, I had not ended up going to the fundamental Christian church where in a previous um, video I explained how my parents decided what church they were going to, and the one that we went to was was fear-based, and I knew when I was a child. We started going there when I was 6, so I knew that it was gonna be really unpleasant. But as I experienced myself in this parallel life, I did not choose, my family did not choose to go to that church where I was basically programmed and indoctrinated, and um, it was authoritarian, and the head deacon of the church molested me when I was 13. So in this experience of the parallel universe or parallel lifetime, I did not go through that experience. So I got to feel myself as free from all of that energy, the molestation, the fear base, the indoctrination of victim, savior, victim mentality. So it was really an interesting sensation to experience that. So that's one I just remembered. um, other than that, I have about a dozen stories other than the intuitive flash at 5 years old. Um, and these happened either in meditation or in dreams or visions. So I've had a lot of amazing dreams over my lifetime. But one of them was a meditation that I repeated, and I met a woman in meditation, and the first time I saw her, she was in a boat. She was alone, and she was in a boat, and she was wearing a hat. So I asked her her name, and she said her name was Elizabeth. And uh, believe it or not, she was on Venus. So some of us can travel through our minds to other planets and out into the universe. And I've talked about that before in some of these videos. So I hope you'll watch them sequentially. There is a little bit of a timeline with these. But it turns out that she was or is the spirit guide for Elizabeth Barrett Browning, the poetess, who was married to Robert Browning, both very famous. And I happen to have her Sonnets of the Portuguese, and it's a numbered copy, so it's one of my prized possessions. Okay. Um, but I've meditated with her, and she said that we might do some writing together. Uh, I have not done writing with her. Between earning a living, growing, and with the ascension process going on, and all that's happening on the earth, it's just been difficult for me to get to that. So um, I'm 73 now, so if I'm going to live to over 100, then I still have some time. Okay, so by the way, anytime I meet with her, she's always wearing a hat, so I know who she is, because most of the entities that I meet um, don't seem to wear a hat. Although I just remembered another one that I met in meditation, that was an Indian, and he was wearing a black hat. It was like a top hat, and so that's what I named him. I named him Top Hat, and he was very grumpy looking and very stern, and he never said anything. He just would appear in my meditations. So my takeaway from that was that he might have been some sort of a guide and perhaps a shaman to help me with my path. Mysticism and shamanism, although different, they are closely related. So um, He would show up periodically. Um, Now, one dream I had with my spirit guide, where I've talked about in previous videos on this topic, um, meeting my spirit guide where he appeared in different forms. But in this dream, he appeared as an angel with flowing white robes. And we were standing on a dock at a lake, and there were all these colors floating in the sky. I think it was nighttime, so it wasn't a rainbow. So he was channeling through my roommate who did channeling and psychic work, and he did come through and he explained that I had achieved um, some progress that I had been tested on. And we test ourselves, but our higher selves work with us on that so that we can tell where we're at and what we need to um, continue working on. But he told me I passed with flying colors, hence all these streamers of uh, colored ribbons. And so I did get to meet him in there. Now it was not a long dream, so I didn't talk with him, but I did in channel. And then I meditated with him, and I can tell you when I would meditate with him, um, I would be like gone. I would be so deep in meditation, and when I would come back, my chakras would be spinning super fast, just amazing energy from meditating with him. Now I feel he's closer than meditation. He's just here within me. So now a couple of interesting dreams I'll tell you about were with death. Now, our culture seems to have an aversion to death, so people are afraid of it. And I, after my initiation, where I was just in the depths of darkness, um, once I managed to create light in that darkness. Now, in some initiations, people are taken to the light, but some of us have to create it. The darkness is so um, deep that we have to create that light from within ourselves, which is entirely possible. So since then, I've not been afraid of death, and I've helped people pass over, and um, there really is no ceasing to exist. It's just we change dimensions. Like I experienced that parallel dimension. I've had other live stream recall, so we don't die. And although sometimes we're emotionally connected by ribbons to people when they leave us, we do have a grief period, but they're really not gone, and sometimes we feel them around afterwards anyway. So the one dream that I had with death, and death in both of these dreams appeared as a skeleton. So it was obvious that this was death. The one, we were just walking together, and it was really interesting because death asked me for my views on death. He wanted to know what I thought about it or how I felt about it. Now, death in astrology appears in the eighth house with psychicism, sexuality, and death. So, um, the other dream I had, Death was driving a green car, and it was an old car. I mean, an old model. It looked, I mean, it was in good condition, but it was an old model. And I was walking, so Death was driving on the street, and it was again at night, and he was driving in the car, and I was getting ready to cross the street, and he tried to run over me, but magically I jumped up, um, stepped on the car, and hopped over it. So in that dream, the takeaway from that, the interpretation of it, is that death has no hold over me. Death cannot claim my life. It just can't be. So it's all interesting to ponder. Okay. So, and I'm not expecting anybody to believe what I believe. These are my stories and my experiences, and I'm sharing them because it's part of life on the mystic path. Okay? So, just food for thought. So, uh, so this is the episode on meeting angels and guides. I have a ancient yogi guide from India that works with me since I've been doing yoga for such a long time. Now, he did channel through my friend that does the psychic work. So I did talk with him, but I've met with him in dreams, and he's teaching me yoga in these dreams. Um, and I can play with him when I'm doing my own yoga. Like if I'm in a balance pose and I feel like I'm going to start to topple over, I can ask him to catch me, and energetically he does. So I don't topple over. Now, when I'm teaching yoga and I'm focusing on a lot of different things, sometimes I'll be in a balance pose. Or if I'm having a challenge, I was working home health care for a client that was getting ready to pass over. And I was sitting with him for hours at a time, just holding his hand. And so all of that sitting, and I was working many hours with him just to be of comfort. And it was one on one. So I was doing like 30 hours plus some other work, but I was sitting so many hours that my hip flexors shortened and became very tight and sore. So sometimes when I'm teaching, I'm still coming out of that. That was in April, middle April when he passed. So I just have a little bit of soreness left. I just had to work through that. But sometimes when I'm teaching, I'll topple over in a balance pose just to lose my balance, not to fall over. But anyway, I can call on my guide. His name is Ashiro, and he's around um, at any time. So when you have a guide like that, when you think of them, they're there. Okay. So um, those dreams were starting around the late 1980s. Um, so I started teaching yoga full time in 1985. So that's when a lot of my experiences started with mysticism, the dreams, the visions, and so forth. So then I also would meditate, and I would go to a cave. I love caves, and not that I go to caves a lot, but I love the cave energy, being surrounded by earth and grounded on the earth. But I used to meet sages in these caves, and I could ask them all kinds of questions, and they would answer my questions. And so I could progress on my path using their input. Now, I did have a dream with a fellow that used to channel through my friend. His name was Produce because he was vegetarian, and he was actually um, one of the tormentors, one of the in Mexico. He was torturing me as a witch. So I had past life recall while my friend was my roommate, and I remembered that it was him. It was this person. He's human. Um, Produce was the one that was my inquisitor as a witch. So he would torture me. I remember some of the things that he did, and part of his payback of his karma was coming through my friend who was channeling and teaching us metaphysics and compassion and um, just the way things work, okay, spiritually, because we've learned a lot of things that just are not true. So in this dream, it was again at night, and there was a car involved, and he was escorting me to this car, and he somehow found a chair. You know how dreams are. Poof, boom, there's a chair. And he started beating me over the head with it. And he pushed me into the car in the back seat, and I was very afraid, so I started to chant white light, white light, white light, white light. And I looked into the rear view mirror of that car, and the white light started to come through that mirror, and boom, I was out of the situation and was safe. So he channeled through for one, and told me that the purpose of that dream was to create a mantra for emergency situations. He says it's good to have a mantra that you can chant in an emergency. So there have been times when I've used that. It wasn't so much a physical emergency as more an experience, okay, mental, emotional experience. So for whatever that's worth, if you want to go into introspection and see what your personal mantra is, um, my recommendation is don't make it a long one. In emergencies, you want something quick. All right. So, and again, I did not die and I was not hurt. It was just the experience. And I knew it was him, but it was necessary to go through the experience to learn the lesson. So the next person that I met in meditation, uh, it was a man. He was dressed in a business suit and he had these big glasses, and he just showed up, and I felt like I knew him, and I felt all this love for him. Just a huge attraction and feeling of love. So in the meditation, he was across from me, and I didn't see a stairwell, but it looked like he was climbing the stairs. He was going up, and he wanted me to come with him. But this stairwell or this plank, wherever he was going up, I couldn't see where that was leading. So I was a little suspicious, a little concerned about going with him, especially not remembering who he was. So that was an extremely important meditation because that fellow turns out was named Marishkin, and in my book, I explain about him. He's angelic, and he has been a mate of mine in many, many, many lifetimes because since that meeting with him, I've had remembrances of being with him in other lifetimes. So he was channeling through my roommate. I got to meet him, and then the story unfolds from there. I'm not going to give you that story because it's basically the crux of my book. So I'm going to recommend, if you want to buy it, fine. If you don't have the money, write me and I'll see that you get a copy of it if you're truly interested in it. But it is the one titled, I Forgive You, Daddy, Yoga and the Angels Healed Me. So he is one of the angels and he channeled other angels. So along with astrology, channeling, dreams, past life recall, psychicism, telepathy, walk-ins, and the whales. So it's not a long book, but it does go through how I attempted suicide when I was 23 and how yoga basically found me, and that's been my path to healing. There are many paths, all paths lead to the same source. So choose, but find one, okay? Because we all need to clear out our karma. We need to clear out our subconscious minds, and that way it'll be a lot easier on us when we ascend, when we go into a higher vibration. So that's what all of this is about. Okay, so that's Marishkin. Really, really important experience with him. But I'll leave you to read that on your own because it's really interesting and I don't want to give you the spoiler alert. Okay, so another dream I had, I was with the Dalai Lama. He just appeared in the dream. We were sitting on a bench. He was wearing saffron robe, and we just sat there quietly for a while. And he just kind of piped up and said, "Keep on doing what you're doing," just like Jesus said when I saw him. And I explained that I think that was the second video I did. So it's like, okay, I guess I'm on the right path. Um, Now, many angels have shown up. I'm a Reiki master and I give Reiki sessions, and I've been doing them since I've been trained since 1997. So I've attuned over 100 other practitioners, and when I'm giving a session, oftentimes the angels show up, whether I have my eyes open or closed. Sometimes I'll feel someone else's energy on top of my hands as I'm working with the Reiki. Um, One time I was working with a client. She was a weekly client for a long time, years. And I was giving her Reiki, and I was near the end. So I was at the foot of the table. If you don't know what Reiki is, it's energy work, it's healing, and it's using the um, divine energy that we're we're trained and attuned to bring through. And I was standing with my back to my client with my hands on the soles of her feet. So as I had my eyes closed for this one, and I saw Gabrielle. the feminine of Gabriel, angel, and she was wearing this beautiful, it looked like velvet, emerald green gown with gold trim, and she had this beautiful long hair, and it was like tight waves, thick and beautiful, and she had a trumpet, one of the long old-fashioned trumpets, and she started panning us. She just went um, with her trumpet across us, across the room. She was facing me, and my client, of course, was on the table lying down behind me. And there was no sound with the trumpet. So I had to meditate on that for a while because I wasn't sure what she was doing, but it was revealed to me that she was raising our vibration through through vibration that she was sending us. So it was beautiful. She was so beautiful. I can see her in my mind's eye now. But so things happen in Reiki as well, especially when you're on the mystic path, and they're impactful, they're positive, and help us with our growth and changes. So now my cat was just here sitting on my lap, and I thought I would tell you this story. It wasn't in meditation, but I had prayed. Um, so it was in 2005. I was in this apartment and I had gotten a cat. She was black, Yoda, from a family that lived not far. I was out in the country in an apartment, and then this family lived maybe like a country block away, and they were looking for a home for this cat. She was only, I think she was 6 months old, and they had a dog, and she was the last kitten from a litter, and they hadn't found her a home yet. And she was black and she was beautiful, so I went to see her, immediately took her home. And at that time, I was traveling on weekends, maybe a couple times a month, teaching yoga seminars in a 5-state region. Okay, in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Indiana. I've taught in Florida. So I was teaching yoga workshops, and so I would be gone overnight, and I would come home, and Yoda would just be going crazy. She was so lonely. When I would come back, she was just so my heart was breaking because she was alone. Well, in this apartment, they didn't even want me to have one cat, but they acquiesced and let me have her. And so it's like, oh dear, what am I going to do? I tried having a friend come and stay with her, but the friend didn't. She just came and visited her and then left. Um, she told me she would stay overnight with her, but she didn't. So that didn't help much. So I said a prayer. I said, I don't know what to do. They don't want me to even have her, let alone get another cat. So Spirit, I need your help. Whatever you can do on Yoda's behalf, please send us some help. So it wasn't long after that that I had gone outdoors, and there was a carport on the back of this apartment. And at the time, there was no cars in it, but I could hear something, an animal screaming at the top of their lungs, just screaming loudly. And I couldn't find it. And it was really strange because there were other people that lived in this apartment building, and some people were coming out, they were walking around, going to their cars in the parking lot, and nobody else seemed to hear this sound. So that was really strange. So I walked around and I saw something move, and it was really small and it ran. So it was so small I couldn't get to it. Could get into spaces where I couldn't get to. So I kept watching for it and it kept screaming, and then I did see it, and it was a little kitten. It was like 4 weeks old, tiny, just a tiny baby, and it would run away from me, but it was really hungry. So I had some dry food that I gave Yoda, so I brought some down and gave some to this kitten, and the kitten was terrified. So I tried to catch it and I couldn't catch it. And this was in November, 20 degrees, and it was starving. I just had to do something. So I just kept watching for it. So all day long, I even had to drive down to Loudonville from where I was living, which was an hour drive, teach a class and come back. So it was like 10 o'clock and it was dark, and this baby was screaming. And finally, there was the back of the building, there were these huge bushes that were old, so they were really big, and they came out from the garage or from the back of the um, apartment building. So it was like a flat wall, is what I'm saying. And I saw the kitten go under those bushes. So I went up to my apartment. I got a dish towel. I brought it back down, and I'm crawling on my belly. The bushes were as far away from this wall as I was tall. So I had to crawl quite a ways. Um, and I threw the towel over it, and I caught him, and I picked him up, and he was just shaking because he was freezing, he was starving, and he was terrified. So I took him in right away. I gave him a warm bath because he was flea ridden, just tons of fleas on him. And I gave him some dry food. I don't think she was eating canned food. So I gave him a little food, and then um, called the vet, and they had um, kitten milk, okay, kitten formula. So I went and got some cans of kitten formula. They were like $3 a can, but for 2 weeks, that's what I fed him. So Yoda was afraid of him, so I put him in the bathroom, closed him in there so he could just kind of get used to being in a house, and kept giving him food with a bottle. He was so adorable, and that was Confidence. And I named him that because as I introduced them to each other slowly, I'd bring him out and set him out, and she'd, you know, and she was 6 months old, and he was just 4 weeks, tiny and no threat, but she was not happy. So just over time, I introduced them and got them together, and then they became friends. And um, I didn't tell my landlords because I knew they would not be happy, but I figured, you know, this was an answer to prayer. He's a little angel. He's he's I named him Confidence because as little as he was, he would walk over to Yoda and walk under her neck and just kind of strut past her as though she wasn't even there, and she's there hissing at him. So I named him Confidence, and we call him Confi for short. So he was just here a little bit ago. So it's interesting life on the mystic path. But many people have those kinds of experiences. It's just a fun story. Okay, so my last story is an angel. Last year I met her. I had taught a class. I teach in my hometown every week, at least I was. Now I'm teaching that class online because of the the coronavirus. But in 2019, I was still driving there. It's like 45 minutes away from here, and I love my hometown. It's just a small community, and it's beautiful. And I teach at the town hall, which has been refurbished. And so anyway, I had taught the class, and the students were in Shavasana, and I was in meditation, and this angel shows up, and she was wearing white, and she had like blonde hair, but it was like big hair, like um, her hair reminded me of Marilyn Monroe, only it was long and much bigger, much thicker, but the same smooth style and color. Okay. So she also had what appeared to be huge wings. Now, I see angels around sometimes, and I see their color because they do come in color. I've seen red ones and blue ones, and I know there are silver ones and, of course, white ones. But she was there, she just appeared, and I said, okay, hi. And she said her name was Verona, and it's spelled Varona, at least phonetically. That's how it sounded when she spoke her name. And I said, well, are you here to work with us on anything specific? And she said, yes. I help with time management and with growth. So when you need help with um, your time management, if you're running late all the time or find yourself rushing a lot, like you don't want to do that. It's not healthy. Even Deepak Chopra mentions rushing sickness. So she said, you can call on her. I said, can anybody call on you? And she said, yes. Anybody can call on her for help with that issue. So you can call on Verona if that's something you need and you believe in angels and you want to work with an angel on that specific issue. Okay, so those are all the stories where I've remembered meeting guides and angels um, and Confi. So I have one more Mysti-Story, and I may do that today yet. It'll be the last one, and the last one is going to be on loss of loved ones. So it's a bittersweet one, but it's beautiful and really beautiful. So I thank you for stopping in to watch my video on mysticism. And again, my website is michellestaryoga.com, and my email is michellestaryoga@gmail.com. So if you have questions or comments that you want to send me via email, or you can write in the comments below too, and I will put my book in there. If you want to click on the link, it goes right to Amazon, and you can see what it says and what it looks like. Oh, that's another story. Uh, I'm going to bring this over to you so you can see on the front cover of my book. You see, this is like a stream. Okay, it's like rocks and a stream rolling over the rocks. Well, if you can see this rock right here, um, when I was creating this book and the cover, because I self-published, when when I opened to the section where you could choose your cover for your book, This was already there. Like, it was a sample, but it was already up. And I thought, "Wow, I really like that. Well, I wonder what else they have." So I looked at other book covers that were options. They had a lot, and I looked at quite a few of them, but this one was just right. So it was probably years later. I wrote this in 20 I published it in 2014. Um, so 2015, 16, probably 2 or 3 years later, I realized that I have a stone shaped just like this that Marishkin gave me, the angel in my meditation. He gave this to me, but it has a hole in the middle of it. And when you are in possession of a rock that has a hole in the middle of it, it is a healer's stone. So it can be used for healing purposes. You can look through the hole and use that as a meditation dive, I'll call it. Just like in the meditations I had back in the 80s that I mentioned in one of my more recent videos, where there was like the shape of a tuba and it was white, like plastic. Same thing, you can look through that and it takes you into a different dimension or state of mind. So I was blown away by that because I sent this to a friend and I told her about it and she was blown away too. So um, I don't have the rock with me. It's upstairs in my bedroom. But anyway, thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy it and namaste.